Go.
If I can do it, then you can too. Oh, team together and we'll make it through. I've been going solo for all too long, and it's time to move on. ADHDers, 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 ADHDers.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We've got a really interesting episode for you today. We have the fascinating Maike, who is here. Hello. Welcome.
Hello.
ADHD
Hello.
Explorers.
Thank you.
So, the whispers say that you're a psychologist, synesthesia artist, and podcaster. She's a specialist of synesthesia. So, we're going to explore what this fascinating topic is. Welcome. Howdy.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. Was really looking forward to this.
Yay.
And you did
It's
such
so
a good
great to
job
have you on.
saying synesthesia
Oh,
without
thanks.
any mistakes.
Before we started, I was practicing for like 20 pronunciations. But synesthesia. What is synesthesia, Maike? What would you say?
What is synesthesia? It's a neurodivergence. It's lesser known because it's not a pathology, but it's just as interesting. It's actually really, really fascinating. So synesthesia is where you have a slightly different brain connectivity. Areas in your brain that usually aren't connected are connected. This means that someone who might hear music and they have a auditory visual synesthesia, meaning they hear the music, that's the stimulus they get, and their brain reacts with not only one reaction, but two reactions. So you would look at the brain in an fMRI scan, and you would see that once they hear the sound, not only the auditory part of the brain activates, but also the visual part. Meaning they would see the music and colors, shapes, textures, either in their mind's eye or projected out in the world, or some just associate colors completely, like they don't see it, also not in their mind's eye, but they just know that piano music is red or something like that.
Right.
There are over 60 recognized forms. So it's a very, very diverse topic, and therefore it's really hard to do it justice. That's why we have the Synesthesia podcast, to just talk about all the forms, because they're so different. I can give you a couple of examples other than the music synesthesia if you want, because they're so different. Okay, so we get an idea. It's mostly a sense connected, and we get, or two senses connected, and then we get two neural reactions to that one sense. You can also taste words, which is a form that I don't have, but a friend of mine does. So whenever he speaks or someone else is speaking, or they hear a sound or a name, they would taste that word in their mouth. And it's not just an association, it's an actual mouth feel with temperature, texture, and taste.
Wow.
I know, like the taste synesthesia part is really just mind-blowing.
So
Another form.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, ask your question.
I was just going to say, so they're going around living life, and the stimuli in their environment is triggering these visceral, felt reactions and taste reactions in their mind or mouth.
Yeah.
Wow.
All day. Yeah.
Wow. Because
the one I was just talking about is actually James Wannerton. He's the president of the UK Synesthesia Association, and he is he's a taste synesthete, and he did a lot for the synesthesia community. Oh, I think we just lost someone.
Yeah, Addie's dropped out, but she'll be back.
Okay. Oh, there she is again. So he did a ton for the synesthesia community, and he's a taste synesthete. And yeah, we spoke a lot also on my podcast about how it impacts your relationship to food, to loud places, to people as well. Like it shapes your partner preferences, because if they have a name that tastes like bin juice, it's like you can't, right? You just can't date them because it doesn't feel good.
Bin juice.
Yeah.
So it's like everyone has a different... Sorry, go ahead. I was just wondering, like, do people have different? If you have two people with taste synesthesia, let's say, and they would have their own
Yeah.
interpretations of the same, like, stimuli, let's say. So, like, one person
I
could see
imagine.
someone as bin juice, and the other one could see them as like strawberry cheesecake.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's very
Wow.
subjective, of course. Yeah, no, there really isn't much universal synesthesia out there. I think the closest we get is that a lot of people say the letter A is red. I don't know how you feel about the letter A, but for me, it's definitely red and nothing
Well,
else.
now you've said it's red, but I think I could color it whatever I want in my head, right?
Right. I can't.
When I was
Like for me,
younger,
it's always a
I
costume the letter puts on. Like it's always red.
wow. When I was younger, I used to have like female and male for like the numbers,
Yeah.
What?
but it like
Is that like odd and even? Did it correlate with odd and even?
a bit, yeah. Like odd was real female, and four was like, oh, that's boyish ass. That's like a truck. That was my experience.
I think we need to talk about the mind's eye because I like have my mind blown like recently, I guess last year when I found out that like not everyone has a mind's eye,
Yeah.
which is just it's absurd to me as someone who does. And like because I have I guess close to like photographic memory in a way. Like I
Yeah.
look at a piece of paper and I can take a photo and put it in my brain so that I can reference it later. I found out when I was like 17, 18 that not everyone has that. I just thought that was I was like, how else do you take like memories? You
Yeah.
take a photo with your brain, right? Like you close your eyes 7 times and it
Yeah.
takes a photo.
Wow.
And I didn't know that other people don't experience the world that way until I was like 18 years old. I was like, how else do you study? You take a picture of your notes and then you read it in the exam.
Yeah.
Which I guess technically I was never really like learning my content that much. I was just like reading my cheat sheet in my brain.
Yeah, well, I guess there are different
it's-
ways of learning. It's valid. I did it just the same way. It's just the way I remember stuff. I still got it, I would say, because but it's nice to remember where on the page it was at the beginning, like what photo, how big
And
it
if
was.
you
It
don't
just
look at it
helps.
properly.
Yeah.
And then there's like a little, I don't know if you've had that. There's like a blurry spot in the corner, and you're like, oh, I really need that formula right now, and it's just I can't quite see it in my head.
Maike, do you have that? You're familiar with that form of like synesthesia, where it's like a kind of intense memory?
Yeah, so that's not synesthesia. That refers more to like the ability to have mental imagery in your mind's eye.
Yeah.
So this is a spectrum, like anything in the human experience. And one end of the spectrum is hyperphantasia, which is what Eddie just described. And then the other end would be aphantasia. So hyperphantasia and aphantasia.
High detail in your mind, and then aphantasia is like a lack of a
like the complete absence of a mind's eye. And it's interesting. My mom has aphantasia, even though synesthesia is big in our family too. And there are synesthetes who have aphantasia. Like it's not you can definitely have both, but for a lot of synesthetes,
it's just connected with different senses, I guess.
Yeah, for a lot of synesthetes, hyperphantasia is a daily, like that's just how they experience their synesthesia. So they, like when you guys just think about an elephant, for example, and you can maybe imagine it or not, that's kind of the place in space where we also see our synesthesia. So I just have a constant monitor in my head where I imagine things. Like when we speak, as we speak, I see the words. That's another form. I have ticker tape synesthesia, so I see what I say and what you say written out in subtitles in my mind's eye. You as well?
Write in your brain?
It's like computer font.
Someone gives you your name, and you're trying to remember how to say their name. So you write it. You're like, can you spell it? So you write it out in your brain because then it's easier to remember.
Yeah.
Do other people not do this? I am like my mind is blown.
Wait, so Addie, describe your experience. You're saying that when someone says their name.
For me, it's like handwriting. some people have a typewriter. Yeah, so if you were to like spell out your name, I would be writing like BENJAMEN, like in my head.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I do that. I learnt to spell like that, but now I remember words through sound because I have the auditory
Mm-hmm.
hyperphantasia, I would call it, because like
Mm-hmm.
I generate all the music in my mind and it's very high resolution. When people talk
Mm.
in their tone of voice, I feel like I have such like sensitive ears. I think it's part of the autistic side of me that has that hypersensitivity. But I hear the tone so viscerally that I can tell if someone's lying, or I can tell if someone's happy or genuine, or like if they've had a sad news that day. But I I feel like when I learn words, I learn them sound first with a visual like tag, like with a visual representation also.
I love that, but
If
that
that
is
makes sense.
absolutely mind blowing to me because I feel like my auditory processing is not so good. I need stuff to be written out in order to process it. So I'm
Mm.
definitely on the side of if someone says their name and I don't know how to spell it, like no way, no way, I won't remember it.
It's like
Mm.
your brain designed a mechanism to help you understand it with that ticker tape
That's what I think.
almost.
Yeah,
Do you feel?
Mm.
Because if your auditory
yeah,
processing isn't on point, which like when people talk sometimes I don't grab it, but to see it visually as
yeah,
ticker tape, wow, brains are crazy.
yeah,
So that's called ticker tape synesthesia, isn't it? Right?
yeah,
That's what I read on
yeah,
your. Because it was fascinating.
Oh, where you write things in your brain? Huh.
yeah. So
I wish I could do it to the point where I could like actively close caption things, like, because I can't do that. Because
yeah.
your only brain is only outputting what it receives, and so if it misses words or whatever, you're not like then. But that would be great if you were like,
Yeah.
oh, I missed a word, and you can go back and look.
For me it's more that like if I hear someone speak and I don't understand a word, my ticker tape will get stuck with that word until I have figured it out. And once I'm done with the word, the rest of the ticker tape can come. So it's very like automatic. I don't do a thing. It's not like I want to remember the words and therefore I try to figure out how to spell them. It's just my way of thinking. As we are speaking, I see the words in my head.
Mm.
And because of my grapheme color synesthesia, which is where letters and numbers have a color assigned, all the words I see are colored. It's not even a black and white thing. So when I would say Ben and Eddie, I would see your two names in the colors assigned to your names. And that happens for every
What color
fucking
are
word
names?
every single day.
What's that? What's that like for you?
So of course, absolutely normal for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, but what I just came to understand over the last year, and now that I'm as a psychologist and neurodiversity coach, I work with neurodivergent, especially synesthetic clients who also have hyperphantasia. Like those are my main clients. We figure out why they're we just figure out their neurological makeup and why things are hard, and then also just talk about normal life struggles with a lens of neurodivergence. So just a lot of the stuff that is missed in usual therapy for a synesthete or a neurodivergent person. This is my focus, to really look at everything through the lens of their neurodivergence, because you can't help someone if you don't do that. And for synesthesia, I'm realizing more and more that there is just such a big mental health impact of synesthesia. Yeah, of synesthesia on our well-being, even though for a long time we really tried as a community to make synesthesia stand alone and take it away from the misconceptions of it being hallucinations, or it was misunderstood as many things.
Mm.
So of course over the last 100 years people really tried to make an effort that this is a condition that you can observe in a brain scan. Like it's totally there, it exists, and it's just a non-variant of the human brain, and it's nothing to treat, nothing to cure. But like some forms, as I described, they just have a big impact. The ticker tape on top with the other 12 forms that I experience, it is a lot. Like my mind's eye is packed all day, and going into the city is a lot. Going to a concert, sitting at a table with 5 or 6 people where everybody's talking maybe in different languages.
Lots of people,
Of course, it
yeah.
is a lot.
What I was saying, what's it like for you to go into a restaurant and you have all of those voices? What's it like for you with ticker tape synesthesia?
Yeah, so I have just a lot of sensory sensitivities that make it hard to go to a restaurant to begin with. I'm very sensitive to sound, to emotions, to smells, to texture, light, heat. Like everything is a lot for me. And then I wouldn't say that ticker tape is the one thing that makes it really hard for me to sit at the table. Since I'm autistic, it's also just hard to find what should I say? When is the right time to say it? Does everybody have equal parts in a conversation? But the ticker tape definitely it gets more and more fun to observe it, because when someone would just laugh very loudly, I would see HAHA written out like really, really big. And that kind of stuff is just very funny. And then some, the sounds of someone laughing, if there isn't if I can't pinpoint a letter to the laugh they make, then just my auditory synesthesia would kick in. I would see the laugh in colors, and then a slamming door I would see in colors. So there's just a lot. It's a mess. There's so much going on in my mind's eye when I'm with people.
This is why I wanted to talk to you about this, because I have a friend who is like he's an amazing, incredible ukulele player. And he says that when he plays a chord, for each chord, he has an emotional association relationship with that has a whole set of associations. Like one is like, even I have like a milkshake chord that's like a summer day, So I was wondering like how common it is, the overlap between synesthesia and like ADHD and autistic spectrum. I'm sure your clients, like, and the people you see and talk to, I'd love to know more about like how often it overlaps with like autism, for example.
So for autism, we do know the stats quite well. Synesthesia, like it's already hard to say how common synesthesia is, because there, like I said, over 60 different forms, and some are more like 1%. That would be like mirror touch synesthesia, where you see someone being touched and you feel the touch on your own body, because your mirror neurons are so blurry that they can't distinguish between what is happening to the other person or to you. So if I would scratch my face, for example, you would feel it on your own cheek if you were mirror synesthete.
Can't watch like horror movies.
Exactly, yeah. But they still do as teenagers, and then they have a lot of
really love
trauma and flashbacks. Yeah, it depends. If there is a lot of if it's aggressive, it really has to be good porn to be enjoyable.
Enjoy the kind of porn that they,
Exactly, yeah. And also like seeing someone being
we need to choose our porn wisely.
Yeah,
we do. Seeing someone being massaged might be nice too for a mirror touch synesthete. So, but of course, like in daily life, it's much more negatively triggering than in a positive way. So that would be like 1% of the population. That's really not a lot. But then again, mirror pain synesthesia, for example, where you see someone like being shot in a movie, for example, or slapped or whatever, and you feel some sort of sensation in your own body, that's way more common. I interview researchers on my podcast because I'm definitely this is my training space to become a synesthesia expert. So I have all these great people come and tell me about their research. And they told me that mirror pain synesthesia, again, is more like 20%. So it's quite common. or it's maybe
Wow.
not even synesthesia anymore because it's just human experience. You see something in someone else and you kind of you feel it. You know, some feel it in their
when you
crutch.
see someone like vomiting and you have like a ha reaction to that,
Yeah,
or you have
yeah,
like, yeah, it's not necessarily, I guess, the same extreme. You're not like feeling like you're being shot, but you're having some sensation
yeah,
in response to seeing it. I see, yeah.
yeah, exactly. But that's kind of the same ballpark, I would say. For me,
Yeah.
for example,
Yeah.
when someone's coughing or like pulling up snot in their nose, I feel like 100% in my own nose, and it's the most disgusting thing. That's just not fun. Like, I don't want to feel
Wow.
your snot in my face. But to go back to the prevalence of all, um, that being said, some forms are more common, some are less common. The number you find is 4.4% across all forms. But then sequence-based synesthesia, for example, as well, is very high. It's like 12%. It's where you imagine, or not imagine, you see sequences in your mind's eye. Like when I think about the year, for example, I see a time beam that starts here at my left eye and it goes to the right further away. And I
Goes up
walk
and
along
down.
that. For you, it goes up and down. Yeah, for some, it's a circle or
Well, I
an
see. If you said
oval.
like 1989, it's like, you know, if you had a ring that you would like move up and down, and then
Yeah,
1989 is highlighted, and then the other years are like drifting away to
yeah,
the sides.
yeah. That's a beautiful visual. I like that.
So that's for timelines, like Micah.
Mm.
It's how people are visualizing time.
So that, yeah, specifically for time, it could be anything, like any shape or form, or maybe it's around your body as well. It can be anything really. But it can also be other sequences, like the numbers from 1 to 1,000. They could be arranged in like a way around your body or just in the space in front of you. I have one friend, when he's calculating, the one number moves from their spot to the other number, and then they birth the result of the calculation. So,
Wow.
Like reproduce.
Wow.
yeah.
I I saw this TED talk by a young boy who was autistic, and it
Hmm.
was all about being the field, and he was a mathematics like kind of genius, and he said the way he visualized numbers was these shapes with the corners, and he would place them over each other, and then it would show him the solution. Like a triangle is 3 points, and then a hexagon is 6 points, and he would do all sorts of maths using this visual vocabulary in his mind. Is that
I love
is that
it. That sounds great.
what's
Yeah.
going
No,
on there?
yeah.
Yeah, he came across like autistic spectrum, like me, and I thought, wow, honestly, I found it kind of beautiful that someone. I feel like whatever we're starting with in life, we can kind of use sometimes, in the same way that like your brain found this way to understand what people were saying by having this visual representation. Do you think that there's more examples of people who have unique ways their brain calculates things, presents things, and they use it to their advantage?
Yeah, for sure. I think, for example, for dyslexia, it sometimes goes unrecognized because people have like grapheme color synesthesia and they can make sense of the words because they can read the color instead of the letters. And then, but I mean, it's not always good because this dyslexia
Mm.
still should be accommodated, so it's not just it just cancels each other out. I think it makes things a bit more complex. But speaking about autism, and I tell that example so often, but I think it's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. One of my podcast guests and friends, he's autistic and has auditory visual synesthesia. And he had a very, very hard time recognizing or reading the other person's emotion. So when he meets someone new, or not someone new, if he just meets a friend and they say something like, we need to talk, or I have news, it's very hard for him to understand, is this happy news or is this angry news or sad? Because he has alexithymia. Sorry, because he has alexithymia and he can't tell what the other person is feeling just by hearing it. But what he realized over the years with his synesthesia, he can look at the color of what they're saying and the saturation level of what they're saying. So if I have news for you is always red because of just their voice and the way they say it, but he can read the saturation level, and if it's more saturated red, he knows it's happy news. If it's less saturated, it must be sad.
Wow.
And this way he found a wonderful, I want to say detour, but also it's just his way of understanding the world. So it's also just a direct way in a sense. Yeah, so synesthesia can come in very, very handy for sure. It's a great thing to have.
It's like
Wow.
you
Do you-
are helping people understand the world in the way their brain is already understanding it.
Yeah.
Would you say that's a part of what you do? Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Work with
Yeah.
what your brain is.
Yeah.
Don't
No, I
fight
think
it,
you
like,
put it very nicely. Yeah. And also understanding, what do other people not experience? And, you know, a lot of us are very fatigued, including myself. And it's just nice to know that this is because if my partner goes somewhere, he doesn't have to handle all these extra, he doesn't have to process as much as I have to. And it's totally fine and fair that I go home and I have tinnitus. I can't, like, my skin is like buzzing, and it's okay because there's a difference. There's a neurological difference, and we have to work with it because I won't get used to it and it won't change. And I don't want most of it to change. Some could change. Yeah, so that's what I do with my clients, learning to understand what is the difference and how to accommodate those differences.
so when you
yeah.
say
You were saying
go
it was
ahead,
about
Eddie.
4% of autists have that type of synesthesia, or the other way around, like 4% of people with that type of synesthesia.
Yeah,
are
I
autistic.
still didn't give you the answer to the prevalence question.
Yeah.
So 4.4 is the prevalence you find for the general population for overall synesthesia, but synesthesia research is very focused only on a couple forms. Like grapheme color synesthesia is very easy to study because you just give people an alphabet and you look at the color. For other forms like orgasm synesthesia, for example, where you see fireworks when you climax, that's very difficult to study. So, of course, not all forms are part of that 4.4 percentage. Okay, that being said, in the autistic population, it's around almost three times higher. So it is very, very relevant. And that's what I'm trying to do, to tell, national societies for autism to bring that on their radar, because also for nonverbal autistic individuals, like, this could be a way to communicate all sorts of things. I, for example, have a form that is called pain to visual synesthesia. So when I have period cramps or whatever pain I have, really, I see it in my mind's eye and it helps me understand it because I can see it. And someone who's non-speaking could maybe use an index card in that color to communicate something. So, and then for ADHD, to finish that topic, it's something that we don't know yet if there is a connection between synesthesia and ADHD. My observation is yes, but that could also be because synesthesia definitely clusters with autism and autism clusters with ADHD. So there has to be some sort of connection, right? Like they are kind of a family. But what we really, really know is that in a family where autism and synesthesia, they co-occur in one family tree. So a mom who has synesthesia is more likely to give birth to an autistic child. Whereas we can't show that for ADHD yet. But it could also be that people just didn't look into it because it wasn't as obvious. But for autism, like, that's all very nicely researched.
I was wondering.
Do you think it's also potentially more common than people realize? Because like I said, like, I didn't realize that I think you commented on our last podcast, like, I think you have emotion-centered synesthesia or something like that. And I was like, doesn't everyone see colors when they feel angry or like whatever? And so it's that we're not looking into it because we assume that everyone sees the world in the same way that we do, right?
So like 100% in the sense of synesthesia awareness, that's our goal, because people just don't know about synesthesia and they don't know about the differences, or they mentioned it once in their childhood and people told them if they keep talking about it, they will be sent to a psychiatric clinic, and they really bury it and don't talk about it ever again. So a lot of people are afraid to talk about it, don't know about it, don't have the language for it, or maybe their whole family experiences it, so it's just even more normal. Or they just lack resources to ever come across this term. But then when you do research, you would go into a university or some sort of event and you would scan a random sample. So the numbers we have for prevalence, at least for those types they looked at, they are from a random sample where people don't have to know whether they are a synesthete, whether they are autistic or not. They took just random samples and look whether they have synesthesia or not.
I would love to ask you how, if someone's never heard of synesthesia before and they're hearing you talk right now, what would be those things you ask them to see if they have some form of synesthesia?
I think a lot of the questions we already covered. I would ask, what color does the letter B have, or S, or the number 7, or the number 2? And if it's hard for them to imagine, I would maybe say, F is blue, isn't it? And then someone would maybe say, well, no, it's definitely orange. Like, why would you say blue? So sometimes it's easier if you challenge them with a wrong color. I would ask them what gender, what personality, what relationship do numbers and letters have, because that's another form. It's called ordinal linguistic personification, where numbers and letters have all sorts of things assigned to them. I would ask them, if you think about the year, what do you see? How do you see the year? How do you imagine September 3rd? Well, how do you figure out how far away that is? Do you see any visual in your head? I would ask them if they ever feel the pain or the touch they observe. I would ask if they see subtitles in their head. I would ask them if music has colors. I would ask them if touch has a taste.
Mood changes.
Yeah. Do you?
Say again.
Yeah, the other.
When your mood changes.
Yeah, that's the form you have, right? You see a color to the mood you experience or the mood someone else is in.
Yeah, for me, it's my mood usually, and it's especially anger for me. But I guess other things a little bit, like experience. I would say like excitement is like yellow, or like gold, yellow gold, like if I'm excited and happy. But anger is very like red. Like, and it's, I guess it feels like the world around me is that color. And then like sadness, depression is gray. And so then, as someone who's experienced like actual depression, and they say that the world is gray, and it's like, it like actually is.
Yeah, this is Yeah, that's a really good point. I think often we misunderstand synesthesia because we think it's metaphorical language, and it often just isn't. Like it often really, like often we are describing what we actually see.
Mm.
Would you say there's some sort of connection with, like, I know that in autistic brains there's a higher interconnectedness in the neurons, and so would you say that that is kind of like, does that take it makes sense in my mind right now, at least, that this interconnectedness of the neurons is what makes these reactions?
Yeah, so in the brain of synesthetes, but also in the brain of autistic people, they're hyper and hypo connections compared to the neurotypical brain. So there is some sort of shared neurological mechanism. It's just not very clear what it is. But yeah, it's not a overall heightened connectivity. There are also parts where it's less connected, and I think that's the case for both autism and synesthesia.
Yeah.
And actually,
And ADHD, I think.
yeah, the general idea of synesthesia is that every baby is born with synesthesia, like no distinction between senses. So a baby would be born and it's just in a sensory environment. Like there is no distinction yet for temperature, for sounds, for smells. It's all just experience. And as we grow older, our brain forms those pathways and understands the world better, and gets better at understanding what is what. And this is the pruning process where we also lose connections because they're not important. And that's kind of the process where synesthesia develops, even though it was always there. Like the disposition was always there because it's genetic, it runs in families. But childhood is kind of the process where we develop the form we have, because even though synesthesia does run in families, the forms do not. Like my dad has different forms to the ones I have. And this is also why it's sometimes just not recognized within a family, because if you ask someone, do you have colored letters, and they say no, you think, okay, we don't, like, I didn't get it from you, but they might see pain in colors or a taste, touch, or something like that. And then so they're they're more.
When you're growing, your brain is separating the senses into like neurological pathways, but when in synesthetes they start separating, but it's more like a spider web where like then the different senses have these little connectors between them still, whereas in a more neurotypical brain without synesthesia it would be just like these 5-6 sense lines.
Exactly. You can just imagine like there are a couple motorways that still exist for other brains. They just got rid of them because they're not useful.
And we have all these side roads that we're just turning off all the time.
You know what I'd love to say is that, like, I'm glad that there's things like podcasts now for this, because like before we had the mainstream media and it was like neurotypical is the only way, and now we have all of these different ways that are like, if your brain acts how it acts, you can bring value to the world by working with how it works. And that brings me so much love, and I think understanding our own patterns and the advantages or ways to work with the how our brain is so affirming, life affirming for unique individuals with these different neurological patterns. I'm just so happy that you're doing this work to like share understanding, because I think what happens is if someone feels, oh no, I'm different, as soon as you feel lesser than everyone else, you're on a depressive spiral because you don't feel connected to other people. And so we're almost building these communities to say, hey, you're not alone, you're together, let's work on this together. And I think that is absolutely magic. So I just want to say thanks for doing what you do. Oh my gosh, does it make me joy. I felt so misunderstood my whole life. I was seeing stuff in my brain. People were like, oh, I hear voices in my brain. I'm like, you don't hear voices in your brain? Like all the time? come on, like
Yeah.
just for you to come along and be like, yeah, there's different forms and it has this name and that name. I'm like, oh, thank God.
Yeah,
People
It's interesting
understand.
I
because
get you.
I've been talking to a friend about how they're like, why are we constantly like, I don't know, pathologizing or coming up with terms for things and da. And he was like, oh, you have like 4 diagnoses, and I'm like, well, no, actually, the auditory processing is connected to my ADHD. Like they're all connected, and I'm not like giving myself all these different diagnoses. I'm giving words to the experiences that I have,
Aspects.
right?
Yeah.
And it gives understanding, and it helps us find relationship with other people and like feel less alone because we understand that other people experience. Like just having vocabulary, I think is so important to be like, oh, this is what I experience. It's like we need to talk
Yeah.
about it, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. I totally agree. I think I'm the same way. Like I get the discussion around whether we need diagnoses or not, and that it's not always good to put people into this box, but actually just don't put people into boxes. Let them figure themselves out and believe the box they put themselves in, because this is
Yes.
such important information about yourself that took so long to figure out. But once we have labels and diagnoses, we can research it, and it gives people access to the right treatment, either therapy or medication. And we can't take that away just because we don't like boxes. It's the most important thing to understand how we can improve mental health care by figuring out their categories. They're actually there. Of course, every brain is unique, but there are types of neurotypes that have certain needs, and we can accommodate them in a similar way. And there are other types of brain that really benefit from this kind of medication. So we just need the language, and of course, like you said, we also need it for the community and like just finding people. Because I mean, what the neurodiversity movement did or does online, it's like it changed people's lives at the least, but it saved so many people's lives. And this
So
cannot
many,
be
I think,
underestimated. It saved so many people's literal lives. And that is because of language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I love that.
got me in the feels.
How are you doing, Addie? What's your experience right now?
Yeah, it's like I just love that. I think that's why we're here, right? That's why we keep doing what we do, because I think, you know, like what you said, we get messages from people that say like, thank you for talking about that. I feel less alone. Or I once filmed a video of like my messy house for ADHD stories, and people just being like, thank you. Like that I don't feel alone. I don't feel like a fuck up, because just knowing that other people experience this helps so much. And it's like, it's just beautiful.
Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that.
That's why we keep doing it.
I think shame is a dangerous thing, because what is shame is like a lack of approval, a lack of validation from each others of our experience, you know, or we take it onto our identity that, oh, this is why I am bad, and we feel
Yeah, it
lesser
needs
than,
to be
and
hidden.
it starts off.
Yeah.
So I was just going to ask, I wanted to ask, like, I'm sure you meet a lot of how do I say this? Synesthetes?
Synesthetes. Yeah.
Synesthetes who get overwhelmed, maybe. Is there ways you've found to help them regulate or calm down, or like processes, like they get home and like unwind in some sort of way?
Yes, it's so complex though, because again, the forms are so diverse, and then the experience is so diverse as well. What I'm doing at the moment, which is a big passion project, is I'm writing a book about mental health and synesthesia, and yeah, just how synesthesia impacts mental health positively and negatively. Because so I did a series of interviews with synesthetes to figure out what their experience is, and what experiences they had when they went to a doctor or a therapist because there were a lot of negative experiences, unfortunately. And I kind of collected them all, and I'm trying to figure out what is a good guide for synesthetes to figure out how they can support themselves best. One thing that stood out, I would say, especially amongst the autistic interview guests, was that meltdowns are such intense states to be in. And for some, it's really helpful to either watch the visuals of the emotion or the colors of the breathing, or if it's more an auditory thing, put a favorite song on and then just be in a dark room and watch it, because that can really help you calm down from but I mean, that's again very specific to when music has colors, but that can be really helpful. And I think, I mean, it's not even a tip, because those that have it, I think they know it. Like, they maybe this, when I say it, it gives them confirmation that this is a really good coping strategy and they should use it more. But I think a lot of us, we do know already that this is like our safe space. So we are drawn to the music that looks beautiful. Another thing.
Wow. Sorry. Yeah, I will say something afterwards. Wow. This just
No,
means a lot to
keep
hear.
going.
Well,
Tell
I
me.
had a meltdown maybe like a month and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like I have some childhood trauma of some intense experiences. And I think that sometimes when my safety is threatened, it can trigger a meltdown. And I'm like hyper emotional, like maybe on the floor. And I was in this state for about 3 days where I was like coming back to a regulated nervous system state, is what I call it. And I was wondering, what do I do? Like to come back fully? Like, I'm aware of the breathing and I'm aware of like feeling the sensations in my body and allowing all of them to be there. But I feel like I've realized that the music I hear in my mind is a safe space that I always escape to. It's like a disassociation land of, or maladaptive daydream. I believe that you've put it like that maybe once. But I have this like music land, and I never thought of going there after a meltdown. But like, that's exactly what happened in these, in like, my whole life. I would just be living in this like music video of my mind playing the music. And I never thought of like using it to like be a place where I can feel calm, even though my brain's been doing that my whole life. And just to hear you say that meant a lot, to be like, oh, I can always do that because I can do that. So I might as well work with what I have, my unique brain, and work with it rather than fight it. I think that it just meant a lot for me to hear that.
Oh, I'm glad.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it's
because
beautiful.
I feel like, as someone with, I guess, emotion focused synesthesia, which I didn't realize was a thing, and you're talking about it, and I'm like, oh, it's so overwhelming though, being in that state when you're upset and everything is red and you cannot get out of it. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
it just like put me in my mind in that state, and I'm like, huh. Understanding that other people experience that is like, I didn't know I was going to get emotional. It's also so early in the morning.
This is what we're here for, Addy. All emotions are
Yeah.
welcome.
I think for someone like me, and if there's other people who are like that, where it's very overwhelming to be in that state where you're like upset or enraged and you cannot get out of that like color, I guess. For me, things that have helped is like water, because it like, and physical sensation on your body, like, because it helps you, I guess. It like almost shocks you out of that like state in your head in some way. So I'll like have a shower, or my friend suggested like opening the freezer and putting your face in it, because it like puts like
Brings you
cold
back.
air in your face. And just like finding ways, I guess, to put yourself into a different state mentally, so that you can shift out of that very like intense bubble that you are in when you're having like a meltdown or a rage fest or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for sharing this. Yeah. I think if you
Yeah.
call it a bubble, then I would definitely recommend anything you just said, like physical stimulation, like running cold water over your hands, or maybe you have like a massage ball, anything that really brings your attention back to your body and skin is really good, or
Mm,
your face as well.
mm.
I would be interested to hear if you would experience that big red emotion if you would go on YouTube and you would Google like um, green light show, or yellow, because you said that's excitement. If you would
Mm.
watch any or if you have a wave lamp and you can turn it on in yellow and you watch it, would that do anything to the red? Or maybe it doesn't, because that would just not even get to the intense emotion, and you have to get in your body first, and then you can replace it with another color. But also, yeah,
Yeah.
it's different for
I don't
everybody.
know. I'd have to try that, but that's like a good,
Yeah.
interesting suggestion to be like, oh, just like force force it out.
I mean,
Right
if
here.
it's too much, of course, emotions are also, they are here to be felt. Of course, I'm not just saying put it away, but if
Yeah.
it's so intense,
Yeah.
of course, we want to get out and have a more realistic view on things and not be so overwhelmed. So maybe color can
Mm,
help. I don't give it a try.
yeah. Or getting things out sometimes, I think for me,
Yeah.
like even just like scribbling or like drawing. I think I have
Yeah.
paintings from when I was a teenager that is literally just like red and black, like scrawled on a page because
Yeah.
it's like,
Exactly.
Wow.
I
So
think
you were
this is
almost like,
how a lot of synesthesia art is born. Like, synesthesia art is a whole art genre, and that's what we
mm,
do. We see something and we bring it outside of our brain on a canvas or screen or
mhm.
wherever. So if you just want to get a canvas for your next difficult emotion, and you just put it out there, and you can say, well, look, it it feels bad, but it's beautiful. Maybe that can help.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I
then you
wanted
can
to
sell
ask you
it.
about your synesthesia art and what form does that take?
So before I did anything synesthesia related, I just wanted to communicate it to my friends, and it's so difficult. Like, what's happening in my mind's eye, I did not have the vocabulary for it whatsoever.
Hmm.
So um, the resources you find for synesthesia are also very messy. So whenever someone stumbles across synesthesia, it's like they, yeah, you always end up knowing less than you know before, I feel like, because there's not one good collection of information. So I didn't
Hmm.
have the language when I researched it, and I really wanted to explain it to people. And since I also have really bad sleep problems, like my brain fires all fucking night on 6 different levels,
Hmm.
it's like it should be illegal what my brain does at night. Like, it's so fast. It's so fast, and it's so colorful. So that's the first thing I did with the synesthesia art. I remember what I see at night. It turns just a story I dream into an abstract art piece, kind of like it's
Mm.
floating objects. So one person might be um, a piece of wood, and the other person is powder, and it all makes perfect sense in that dream. They're just not human shape anymore, just an abstract thing. And then I still remember it because it looks kind of cool. And then the next day, I just go online and I try to find things that look similar to the pieces of my dream and collage them together into something that I saw at night. And then I showed it to people.
Mm.
So the dreams were where I started. And then I just observed other things, like the snoring of my partner at night that looked so orange and horrible, because snoring is not pleasant. So the next day I made a collage, or like an art piece about snoring.
It's
Um,
just orange.
uh, yeah, it's like these zigzag things when the person is like here with the snoring, they would come towards me. It's horrible. let's not get into snoring. And then
yeah.
I just take real life examples. Right now it's mainly for content creation. I don't really exhibit at the moment. I used to have like synesthesia art t-shirts where the art piece would go on the back and I would sell them. But right now it's mainly to explain to people what I see. And I think it just, if I just make a video about my period cramps and what they look like they're blue and red, it's just nice for someone else to show this video to their partner and they might understand it better than before because I made a video about it. So it just, my art right now is just a resource library for other people to be like, see, it's a thing. It exists. It's not just me.
Honestly, when I saw you did a graphic on your Instagram page where January, February, March was like surrounding someone in a circle, and just seeing that, I was like, oh my God, someone gets what I see in my head. Like I think just to have that validation of like this intense visual world that I feel like it's always bursting through my consciousness. Like no matter what I'm doing, I see these visuals, and I thought that was normal for everyone. So I'm not really sure how common this is. Like, is it common to have a very detailed hyperphantasia, mind's eye?
So hyperphantasia is a lot more common than aphantasia. So aphantasia is unusual to have a complete absence of mental imagery. Hyperphantasia is much more common. And then this is also, of course, just to what degree. Like I would say I can imagine everything other than having aphantasia. So I really can imagine every scenario, every film, every person, not every voice. My auditory phantasia is not as good as the visual one. But I can imagine, I can bring back a lot of sensations, like when I see someone being touched, I kind of can imagine what it's like. I can smell images and stuff just because I remember things so vividly. And then, it's just two different degrees for different people in these different senses. It's quite common. It's not like super rare to have hyperphantasia. But
do you think there's an overlap with dyslexia? Because I met this guy, he was a dyslexia like poet actually, and he really shared the knowledge of dyslexia, and he said to me, there's only one language that you can't be dyslexic in, which is Japanese, because all of the symbols are little images. It's not like our brain is translating something into words. It is a picture. And I found that really interesting. And he said that like dyslexia to him is thinking in pictures. And so
I like that, yeah.
This is just like words he said, but would you say, because my dad is an engineer and he has this like space in his mind. He's probably on the autistic spectrum as well, but he has this space in his mind where he can design things in his brain. And then he draws it out afterwards. Right. But I always thought there would be like lessons for this. Like, and it would be a bigger normal of a thing. Like this training. Like, how long can you stay concentrated on one mind object? How detailed can you make it? And I think it is a trainable skill, in my opinion.
It's probably parts of it that are trainable. But yeah. I have it like, I can draw a map in my brain, and I do bike races, right? So like here in North America, I think they're all over the place. There's what's called an alley cat race, which is like an unsanctioned bike race. No, so you don't have a start and finish line. You have a bunch of checkpoints that you have to get to, and they'll give you the list, and then you have to figure out how to get between them the fastest, and you choose your own route. And I'm really good because I can draw the map in my head, and because I cycle so much in Vancouver, I like might have to look it up to see, okay, where is it? And then I can be like, oh, and then you go like this. Da, 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 da. And I was racing with a couple of people on the weekend. They're like, how do you just do that? And I'm like,
Yeah, that's an
Yeah,
amazing
I'm like
skill.
overlaying
Yeah.
a map while I'm looking
Yeah.
at the road.
Yeah,
Done.
that's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, I would do the same thing. It's awesome.
I was thinking about this weekend because, like, I know that OpenAI released a new prompt to video model, and it was saying that they need this functionality within the AI to have an imagined, visualized, simulated space so it could answer
Mhm.
questions using this facility that we have as humans anyway. And I found that really interesting, that I think that this style of thinking is definitely underplayed and underutilized in general society. Like, even though Einstein purposefully visualized, and that's how he got his breakthroughs, you know, intentional visualization plus reflection equals freaking E equals MC squared eventually, you know? So why aren't we using this more often? Like, why isn't it taught in schools? Like, I find it mind-blowing, but I guess
That's a good
if someone has
question. Yeah.
aphantasia, but I honestly believe it's a huge asset to so many fields. So I wanted to say that, and that's good. And the next thing I wanted to say was, do you guys see music in your head visually? Or is that normal?
Well, I do,
or
yeah.
is that just me? Okay, great. Because when I listen
Well,
to
tell me
stuff-
about it. How do you see
Okay.
it?
If I'm listening to any piece of music, I can split the parts up into visual lines. I see them like lines in my head, you know, like I'll all of that is like, it's like a double loop the loop, you know? And so I see when I have to make harmonies, for example, I can listen to the melody they're singing, and I see in my head the visual representation of all the potential harmonies that would work over the top. And drums are like circle, circle, star, circle, circle, star. You know?
Wow.
Is that normal? I don't know.
Wait, it's
I've not said this
synesthesia.
out loud before. Is it synesthesia? Okay.
What else would it
Auditory.
be?
And then it's like so visual, though. It's so visual in my head. Maybe that, but I think that's definitely an asset, because it's like,
For you, yeah, because you do music, and it makes sense why you're so good and you have such an innate ability to just like improv music, you know, because you can just like make this
yeah,
image in your brain and then just follow it. It's so cool.
I'm seeing and
And
hearing
remember it.
all the potentials. Yeah, and it's remembered really well.
That's awesome.
It's it's mainly for music.
I mean, you
that-
guys, what you are telling me about your lives is just awesome. I would like to live in your brain for a day. It's so cool.
I would like to live in yours too. Yours is fascinating. Like, it's cool that there's other
Yeah.
people that think.
Yeah. Would you have
Like this,
sex
and
if
I'm
you had
sure-
my
Like-
brain? Because you would see the fireworks when you orgasm. I feel
Well,
like
my
that's
wife
what
does.
people
have
want to
that a little
experience.
bit, like
My
Yeah.
wife
when you have
loves
an
the
orgasm,
fireworks.
you're yeah, I don't know what else.
Isn't
do
that
you
good?
experience when you have an
Okay.
orgasm?
Because I
Not
swear,
even
like, here's another thing I learned from TED Talks is that when people have dementia and get old, their visual cortex sometimes randomly fires unexpectedly, and they see these patterns. They're all visual and all very interesting. I think they called it hypnagogic imagery, even though it wasn't when he was falling asleep. But I found it fascinating that the visual cortex basically gets tired because it's not interpreting the current moment fresh anymore. It's using more so a kind of modeled reality from the past. And so it gets underutilized and it wants to be stimulated. So the visual cortex starts firing off. And this guy is seeing cartoon imagery, is seeing like random shapes over imposed on top of things. And I thought that was really interesting. I don't know how that's relevant, but I want to share that.
It's so funny that you it's so funny that you say cartoon figures, because that's what I see so often. It makes me think. Interesting. Well, thank you for explaining that. That's awesome. It's also what another researcher explained to me, the reason why a lot of blind people have synesthesia and see a lot in their mind's eye. Did you also know, and this is mind-blowing to me, that someone who is colorblind can see colors in their mind's eye? Because it's two different things. if your eye
Yeah,
has a
but do they see
malfunction.
them differently than what our eye would see them?
So
We don't know. We can never know.
my mum is legally blind, and she went to blind school, and she
Uh-huh.
said that so many of them had such different interpretations of the world. Like my mum has this imagined sense in her mind of where everything is, even though she doesn't. She like maps the world with her hands and like what she has left of her vision, and then but she fills in the gaps huge, like
Uh-huh.
you wouldn't. Her mental memorized map of the world is its own universe of.
Yeah.
It's almost like it grew or something. I don't know. It's fascinating though how everyone has different.
That's so
viewpoints and-
fascinating. Yeah.
She said
But
that a
I
big
would say the
misconception-
same thing, that that it is like a second universe in my brain. There is a second reality that is just as important. And I said it in a video as well, like eye contact is really hard for me because I have to get the infos from this place. And I imagine it's the same for you guys, that when you see the music and when you see the emotions, or when your mom wants to remember something, we travel to that space in like our own universe. And I would completely agree that we do not pay as a society enough attention to this amazing space, because it's like, this is where my life happens 50% of the time.
Yeah, I
Okay.
guess that's part of why we're like, we get comments on some of the reels sometimes, like, oh, she's not focused, she's not paying attention, because I look off to the side. Like, I was probably just doing it then, because that to me is,
Yeah.
I'm like reading what you're saying, and yeah, there's like this
Wait.
Yeah,
something else happening
Wow.
here.
100%. I always,
It's here.
yeah, I always compare it to
Sorry,
like
you
someone
go.
asks you for the football scores, like, and you're not allowed to look at the screen. Like, if you want me to answer a question, I have to look at the monitor. How else will I tell you what the score of the football game is? I need to look there in order to give you the information. And this is exactly why I can't look at people's faces, because there is no answer written in your face. It's up there, upright.
And it's
corner.
really hard to like superimpose your mind's eye on their face, because you're getting like active visual input.
It's just not where it
at
is.
the
Like, I
same
have
time.
no control.
Yeah.
It's just not there. Like, I can wish
Yeah.
it to be there, but it's not. Ben, you wanted to
That
say something.
space.
It sounded like there was a lot of
Yeah.
information and emotion.
Well, I was just going to say, you were saying that this space is underestimated, this mind's eye
Yeah.
space. And I was just thinking of Robin Williams. They always thought, like, how does he do it? How does he think so fast to make so many improvised, funny things straight away? So I did a lot of research because I love improvising. And it said that he uses this technique of free association. And what I believe that really is, and what I have practiced that in my life, is that when I'm improvising music, I look at the movie in my mind of what the sound is, and then I just simply play what I see in my mind.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Robin Williams was doing, because
Just
visually,
with like funny
I think
words.
there's so much more information per second working with that visual landscape, the mindscape, as I like to call it, than words. Words are so slow compared.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, I
That's
said
so
it.
good.
That's my philosophy.
And I
got
think
it
it's
out
probably
there.
connected to how, like, as ADHDers, especially for us, and just other types of neurodivergencies as well, we're divergent thinkers. So we take one thought and our brain goes and like creates all these other connections from it. Like, we're not convergent. We just did a webinar on this. This is why I'm like thinking.
Very
about
good.
this
No, I
words.
love that.
And so it's like, I guess we immediately take a connection or 5 connections, and then we experience it just like through different senses or whatever.
Wow. I absolutely love this. Honestly, like, okay, I think we should wrap it up at this point because I need to go to the bathroom. But, Maike, is there anything you would like to share with people about synesthesia that is not understood, or something you would really want to get out to the world about it?
Ooh, I could probably talk another hour about this.
Yeah, I
think
know. I'd love to.
one
We'll
thing
do
we
another
have to
episode
remember.
over on your podcast.
Yes, we will do that. That would be really cool, about hyperphantasia maybe as well. I think one thing we have to remember is when we talk about maybe synesthesia going into mainstream, it's like not everybody has synesthesia, and I think that's a bit like the lines are very difficult. But look into it. Like, it's not that rare. People listening might have it because you probably have a neurodivergent audience. So I would encourage everybody to look into the different forms and learn something about themselves and maybe in their family as well. And it's a really nice topic to just connect with your parents, for example, because because it runs in families, it can create some really, really nice connecting conversations.
Wow. That sounds
Yeah,
really
I mean,
nice.
if you want to learn more about synesthesia, just check out our podcast. I'm
It's
also
called
on
Let's Talk
Instagram.
Synesthesia, right? And what's your Instagram?
Let's Talk Synesthesia. My Instagram is synesthesia as well, but the I is replaced with an underscore. It's not very easy to remember.
Put
Okay,
it in the
we'll
show
link
notes.
it. We'll link it.
Yeah, I removed the
We didn't
I
even
because
get to community questions.
Right. Oh no, we didn't do that. Maybe we can do them on my podcast then. But thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for helping me raise awareness for the topic. And I think there will at least be one person that's absolutely mind blown today because they realized that not everybody has this.
One of us experiences something that they are.
Yeah, you're not alone.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Maike.
Well,
Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Take care. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. And I'll click
thanks
the
everyone
button.
who's joined. We love you. Thanks for listening. Give us a rate, a review. Check us out on @ADHD Explorers on Instagram. And we love to hear from you. We appreciate your support. Bye.
See you later, everyone. Take care of yourselves.
Bye,
And remember
bye.
to celebrate your wins this week. Lots of love.